Lila Bennett felt the pulse of the southern sapphire the moment she stepped aboard. A gentle thrum beneath the soles, calypso horns drifting over the pool deck, and the smell of sweet plantains mixing with sea air. At 62, the retired Massachusetts librarian had promised herself she would try new things, especially those that involved sunshine and cuisine she couldn't spell. So when a brochure in her stateroom advertised a Taste of the Tropics cooking class, she convinced her travel companion Marjorie Dunn to sign up before the first suitcase snapped shut. The galley classroom occupied Deck 7, starboard side, where picture windows framed blue that seemed scraped from a paint box. 12 passengers gathered around a shining steel work island. Newlyweds hovering like magnets, a poker-faced tech executive whose smartwatch glowed neon, an elderly British couple comparing sunscreen SPFs, and finally, Lila and Marjorie gripping branded aprons like trophies. Chef Marco Reyes, all dimples and silver streaks through black hair, welcomed them with a clap. "Today we craft Caribbean cocoa-rubbed snapper with sweet plantain mash," he announced. "Spice is our storytelling language." His assistant, Valerie Lane, rolled out a trolley loaded with squat, glass-topped jars. Each jar bore a handwritten label: island cinnamon, sunset nutmeg, Caribbean clove, and had its own tiny ribbon tied around the lid. Valerie's blonde bob swung like a metronome while she arranged the lineup. Her smile was as precise as the knife at her hip. "Every student gets a keepsake jar," she explained, offering the collection for inspection. A little souvenir to recreate the magic at home. Lila lifted the island cinnamon jar to her nose. The aroma surged warm and floral, though a faint medicinal undernote pricked her librarian's curiosity. She chalked it up to the unknown world of tropical varietals and followed Chef Marco as he demonstrated the cocoa rub. Soon the class sizzled with butter, jokes, and the occasional clang of a pan. For the final flourish, Chef sprinkled bright scarlet something from another jar labeled Midnight Paprika. It glittered like crushed rubies against pale fish. When they sat to taste their work, Lila was struck by how quickly a hush fell. Idle chatter shrank, eyelids drooped. Even Marjorie's legendary enthusiasm for free food faded as she pushed aside half her portion. Lila too felt a fog creep behind her temples, but sheer stubbornness and a nagging whiff of library basement detective novels kept her upright. By the time she and Marjorie reached their adjoining cabins, Marjorie yawned with such conviction she nearly unhinged her jaw. "Call me at dinner," she mumbled, stepping inside and clicking the door shut. Lila perched on her own bed, clutching the keepsake island cinnamon jar. Her eyes felt weighted with pebbles, yet her brain buzzed. Something about that class was off. She cracked open the jar again. The smell wasn't just spicy, it was chalky. She dabbed a fingertip into the powder, grimaced at the bitter taste, and spat into a tissue. Definitely not cinnamon. She meant to fetch the ship's doctor, but the mattress swallowed her like a marshmallow. Afternoon sunlight streaked across the porthole, slid to amber, and then it was dark. When she woke, the cabin clock glowed C1:12 a.m. Her mouth, dry as driftwood, couldn't shape a curse until she spotted her opened suitcase. Jewelry pouch gone, checked bag rifled. Even her e-reader, which had held a queue of 10 cozy mysteries, vanished. Lila's pulse kicked. Down the hall, she hammered Marjorie's door. No answer. She swiped her spare keycard, rushed in, and found her friend sprawled diagonally across the bed, snoring into a guidebook. Marjorie's engagement ring, an heirloom worn on a gold chain, was missing from her neck. Lila shook her until bleary eyes blinked awake. "We've been robbed," Lila whispered. They alerted guest services, adding their names to a growing list. 8 cabins reported theft, every victim a member of that afternoon's cooking class. Security officer Ben Mimbuti took notes at a corner table in the deserted piano bar, apologizing for lack of CCTV coverage in passenger cabins. "Our assumption is opportunistic burglary," he said. "Maybe you all left doors on the latch?" "No one just wandered through 8 cabins without knowing targets," Lila countered. "You need to test those spice jars." Officer Mbuti promised to look into it, a phrase librarians recognize as synonym for indefinite shelving. Lila returned to her room, chewing on another thought. Everyone sickened around the same time, except Chef Marco and Valerie, who drank only espresso throughout the demonstration. They alone looked fresh at cleanup, valiantly packing leftovers into take-home containers. Morning dawned with a port call at St. Lucia. Lila skipped the botanical garden tour to conduct research. The ship's library, small but instinctively navigable to her, held pharmacology references for motion sickness remedies. She compared Latin names, chemical structures, and side effect charts until a pattern emerged. The scent in her jar echoed powdered scopolamine, an anticholinergic sometimes used in patches for seasickness, but also notorious as a fast-acting sedative when inhaled or ingested. In large enough quantities, it could knock out a grown adult for hours, leaving them amnesic and pliable. Someone had replaced cinnamon with scopolamine. But how did the thief know cabin numbers? Lila remembered Valerie's clipboard at registration, noting names beside cabin assignments. Valerie operated the trolley. Valerie handled the jars. Chef Marco, center stage, might be clueless or complicit. That afternoon, Lila persuaded Marjorie to rejoin the next session of cooking class, this time Mango Mojo chicken wraps. Marjorie balked until Lila hissed, "We need evidence." They arrived early, claiming front row spots. Chef Marco offered his usual glittering smile. Valerie's bob remained symmetrical, but her eyes skittered when she noticed Lila's stare. Today, the keepsake jars featured something called sunrise turmeric. Lila waited until Valerie approached with the tray. "We adored yesterday's cinnamon," Lila said cheerily. "I'd love a second jar for my niece." Valerie hesitated. "We have just enough for the class." "You're an angel," Lila pressed, plucking one anyway. When Valerie moved on, Lila pretended to rummage in her purse, but instead slipped the jar to Marjorie. "Take this to the ship's doctor. Ask him to run a tox screen," she whispered. "Tell him it's scopolamine. Say 8 victims reported identical symptoms. Demand urgency." Marjorie, once a high school drama teacher known for commanding auditoriums, straightened with purpose and left. Chef Marco directed the group to marinate chicken strips. Valerie prepared a pitcher of citrus punch. Lila feigned stirring while observing Valerie twist open a jar labeled ocean salt. From her apron pocket, Valerie extracted something, a slim glass vial, and sprinkled its contents into the pitcher before resealing. Lila glimpsed pale powder dissolving instantly. She raised her hand. "Chef, may I ask about the salt source?" Chef Marco flashed dimples. "Harvested near Montego Bay. Bigger crystals, cleaner taste." "I'm unfortunately on a strict sodium diet," Lila lied. "May I smell it?" Valerie presented the jar. Lila inhaled theatrically, buying time to scan the surface. A barely noticeable seam ran around the lid, as if it had been cracked and re-glued. "Lovely," she said, passing it back but filing away details. When Marjorie returned, her thumbs up subtle as a flare gun, Lila's heartbeat finally aligned with the rolling surf beyond the windows. They powered through chicken wraps, refused the citrus punch, and thanked Chef politely before ducking out. In her cabin, Marjorie relayed the doctor's verdict. Preliminary strip test lit up for scopolamine. Ship authorities were now involved, but quietly to avoid panic. Now we just need motive and proof, Marjorie concluded. The motive is robbery, Lila said. Proof sits in plain sight on Valerie's trolley. But security can't search without probable cause, Marjorie reminded her. We have suspicion, not evidence. Lila gazed at the balcony where gulls drafted the wake. Then let's offer them an irresistible piece of bait. That evening, the cruise hosted a masquerade gala. Passengers draped themselves in sequins and feathers. Lila donned a simple black gown, but iced her neck with a rhinestone choker glaringly theatrical, a bauble cheap enough to lose but convincing enough to display. Marjorie borrowed a tiara from the gift shop. They circulated the grand staircase, pointing out their own glitter to anyone within earshot, planting gossip like seeds. Deck 7, cabin 7148. Oh, I'm so nervous leaving my diamonds unattended. By 10 o'clock, the ballroom buzzed. Chef Marco glided through, waving. Valerie trailed him wearing a black mask edged in gold. Lila pretended to fumble her purse so Valerie could see the sparkle cradled inside. Valerie's eyes pinned it, pupils dilating like shutters in low light. Marjorie whispered, "Hook's set." They excused themselves before midnight, weaving exaggeratedly toward the elevators as if overindulged on rum punch, then ducked into a housekeeping alcove. Cabin steward Rosa, briefed by security, waited with Officer Mbuti. Through a discreet camera newly mounted opposite Lila's stateroom door, they monitored the corridor on a tablet. The ship's clocks chimed 12:30 a.m. The hallway remained empty, but for an occasional shuffle of sandals. At 12:44, Marco Reyes appeared. Lila's stomach plunged. She had expected Valerie. The chef, still in gala tux, produced a pass key and slipped into Lila's cabin with surgeon's efficiency. Officer Mbuti hissed, "We've got him." "Wait," Lila urged, adrenaline beating a Navajo drum. "Give him 1 minute. He'll lead us to the rest." The minute crept like chilled honey. At last, Chef Marco emerged carrying Lila's small travel jewelry pouch. He padded down the corridor toward the service stairs. Valerie joined him between cameras, dressed now in crew uniform blues. The two descended. Rosa led the quartet through staff passageways, past rattling laundry carts and muted laughter. They halted outside the demonstration galley. Inside, Marco emptied Lila's pouch beside a larger cache. Bracelets, watches, phones, a dragon's hoard glinting beneath fluorescence. Valerie unlocked a supply cabinet, revealing rows of spice jars identical to class gifts, except labels printed, not handwritten. On the bottom shelf sat a wooden humidor of slim vials. Lila felt the shift in Officer Mbuti, suspicion hardening into righteousness. He signaled his team, burst through the door, and in seconds had both conspirators cuffed. Valerie's mask of composure shattered. "We were only taking from people who could afford it," she cried. Marco spat a curse in Spanish, eyes narrowing at Lila with recognition. "The librarian," Lila folded her arms. "Cinnamon never lies, chef." In the formal statement laboured over the next morning, the scheme untangled fully. Marco, once a celebrated TV chef, had cratered in gambling debt. He joined the cruise line to drown reputation under turquoise waves. Valerie, a culinary school dropout with a chemistry hobby, discovered that bulk scopolamine used medicinally for crew patches could be powdered and diluted. The cooking class provided perfect distribution. They doctored one spice of the day, ensured passengers inhaled or tasted enough to trigger prolonged drowsiness, then targeted the most jewel-laden cabins known from registration forms. They planned to smuggle the loot ashore in St. Martin inside hollowed-out spice jars stashed among legitimate shipments. Security sweeps seldom examined crew supplies. The prosecution now rested on physical evidence. Narcotic-laced jars, vile residues, stolen goods, plus camera footage courtesy of Lila's trap. Within 24 hours, Marco and Valerie occupied the brig, awaiting transfer to authorities at the next port. News of the arrest breezed through decks by breakfast, though official memos spoke only of crew dismissed for misconduct. Passengers pieced together the truth via whispers and the conspicuous return of property. When Lila's e-reader surfaced, safely zipped in a security bag, she nearly kissed Officer Mbuti. He chuckled. "I added a personal recommendation for Agatha Christie's passenger to Frankfurt," he said. "Figured you'd approve." On the sun-bleached top deck, Marjorie and Lila celebrated with coconut water rather than rum. "Just once," Marjorie laughed. "I'd like a vacation where we simply lounge." "Impossible," Lila replied. "Our retirement budget thrives on complimentary cruise vouchers." Sure enough, guest relations presented each victim with a future cruise credit. Lila eyed the pamphlet. Mediterranean Tapas Voyage, featuring daily cooking lessons. "Absolutely not," Marjorie declared. "Think of the olives," Lila teased. They watched flying fish skip the wake while gentle steel drumming wafted from poolside. At last, Marjorie conceded. "Fine, but next time I'm smuggling my own cinnamon." Their laughter drifted up to merge with salty wind, carrying away the last bitter note of counterfeit spices.